Hello, health seekers. Welcome to our second episode in the new series with myself, Richard Smith, and my good friend, Mr. Alan Reeves.
How you
Alan?
doing, pal? How are you, mate?
Very well, very well. How are you?
Amazing, mate. Good to be back. I enjoy this this hour that we spend on here, and I look forward to it. And it's nice to have some adult conversation. The wife's away, and I've been with three kids for the last nine or 10 days. I've lost count now. It's like in the Big Brother house. Dear 25, but she's back next week, so I can go on holiday.
Fantastic. Some adult conversation. Who are you waiting for?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But after we finish with you, then I'll talk to some adults.
Yeah, that's about right. That's about right.
So last week we started it off rather, talking about seed oils and grains. Of course, remove the bread, remove the wheat, and remove the seed oils. And I noticed the post that we posted on our page, when we mentioned the word cholesterol, it gets like 20,000 views, and the seed oil gets like 3,000 views. So does that mean that people are not scared of seed oil, or they just don't know what it is, or do they need more education on that? What do you think?
Yeah, I think cholesterol has been a hot topic for quite some time. I think, the evidence is, I think the evidence is pretty strong in regards to cholesterol being essential and not the demon that it's made out to be. Yet, still within our medical community, it's demonized. But most people, I think, are coming awake to it. I think a lot of people, clients that I speak with, have a better understanding on cholesterol and how essential it is for life. So I think when we post information like this, it speaks to many people. The seed oils is, I think, even though it's part of the same thing, it's a type of fat that essentially comes from plants, which isn't good for us, by the way, and is heavily processed. I think it's still quite new, in regards to the public domain. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time to maybe let that one settle in and just re-educate people. But it's the cholesterol. I mean, it's funny because within our community, like, we don't really talk about cholesterol anymore because we understand that everything we've been told about high levels is rubbish. And
as you posted, and somebody posted the study on our comment, that the study that you talked about, how the lower the cholesterol, the more likely you are to die. And I mean, it's pretty common sense. So I'm a common sense thinker. They've been fantastic at lowering cholesterol the last 30 or 40 years whenever statins came out, but heart disease has gone up, hasn't gone down. So it makes no sense to me. And how did we evolve as humans through the 10 million years before grains was invented, and we was pretty much only eating meat, and when we hunted it, nobody worried about cholesterol then, and we didn't die out as a human race. So I just don't see how we would have evolved if eating all that fatty meat was going to be killing us.
I agree. And look, yeah, you're right. We're still here. We're still here. We are the most dominant species on the planet. We've been through a whole lot of stress and trials and tribulations through our evolutionary period, but we're still here. Now, the common argument that I get quite often is that if this is the ancestral way to live, why was lifespan so short through our evolutionary period? And the fact is that it wasn't. And if we look during the Paleolithic period at the average lifespan, if you look at the literature, it will tell you, average lifespan of like 30 to 40 years.
But this is died at birth.
And this is exactly it. So when we look at this, this is also accounting for newborn babies and infants who are exposed to the elements. We didn't have central heating, clothing. And
I've been to 3 births of my own babies, and when you see it, it makes you wonder how anyone was born 100 or 500 years ago, because it's brutal. and anything can happen. So, no wonder there was a lot of infant deaths on birth or not long afterwards.
And I think it's exactly that. I think it's more to do with the after, babies being born during the winter months, living in the wild in caves, and lack of central heating, lack of sufficient clothing, lack of nutrients. It's harder to find food during the winter periods. It's hard enough for an adult to stay alive. So in simple terms, if we look at the average lifespan during the Paleolithic period past infancy, then this is close to what we would see today, around 70, maybe even 80 years of age. Now,
Right.
that is impressive considering we didn't have any medication, no central heating, no antibiotics, no, flowing, running water direct to your house, sanitation, all of these things that we take for granted today. So if you were to put that person eating their diet and lifestyle into a house in modern life, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that that person could potentially live to well in excess of 100, and it's recognized today, and this isn't disputed by anybody as far as I'm aware within the research community, that the human body is capable of living to 120 years of age given the right circumstance. 120. Yet we look at 60 and 70 and I was being...
I was gonna say, I'm almost halfway.
Yeah. Almost.
Yeah. But I've read about these tribes in Amazonian rainforests, and they're not classed as being an elder until you're 80. You're literally still a junior, if you like, when you're 70. So, wow. They're not exposed to the toxins that we are, and the poisons. So yeah, cholesterol is still a big thing for a lot of people. I've never felt better eating this much fat, to be honest. So,
I agree.
Simple as that. But so today I thought we could progress what we're talking about as if we're teaching people how we go about teaching them the ketogenic diet. And of course, the next step would be lowering your carbohydrate. Now, I chatted to a guy the other day, and he thought he said he didn't have any sugar. So he had no carbs. So I don't eat sugar. So he thought he was fine. I said, do you eat bread? Yeah. Rice? Yeah. Pasta? Yeah. And potato? Yeah. But I don't eat sugar. So is that okay? I was like, no. So they don't realize that all carbohydrate gets converted into glucose. So shall we talk about that?
100%, 100%. And you're right. It's all carbs are sugar, regardless of where they come from in nature. Carbs equals sugar. And this is the common disconnect, I think, isn't it, with, the modern community, is that we think the carbohydrates are different to sugar. They are one and the same. You may be restricting your sweets or your chocolate bars, but eating that bowl of muesli with a chopped up banana is essentially consuming sugar with your sugar. It's 70 to 80% of the carbohydrate, or 70 to 80% of the weight of that product is glucose.
Right.
After conversion.
And so, that's standard healthy breakfast, especially, your Mediterranean breakfast. And we grew up in the 70s and 80s. Everybody was on the healthy muesli. Kellogg's was always a huge advertisement, and they got their trainers on, and that was a start for their fitness journey. At least they're eating their crunchy nut cornflakes with a pair of trainers on. I remember that advert. And it was huge. And that was what we had for breakfast growing up. Maybe we had a bit of orange juice as well, but sugar, and more sugar. I try and get my kids to have just eggs in the morning. If I can get them having that, then I'm happy. It's very difficult as a parent to avoid all sugar, but you can control it a little bit as long as they're getting high fat, high protein, then a little bit for a child. They're not metabolically damaged very young, but you see it now, don't you? You see type 2 diabetes in young kids. 5 years old, 6 years old. I remember my daughter being in a running race, and out of the 10 people running, 6 or 7 was overweight with 3 or 4 obese. And that's really sad to see, because you didn't see that when I was a kid. Never.
Yeah.
You didn't see that overweight children as you do now.
Well, type 2 diabetes was always recognized as a condition which is developed when later in life. And now, as you say, we see it in young children. It's what people don't realize is what we do to us now affects epigenetically, the children that we give birth to, and therefore it affects them and further downstream. So every generation is becoming more damaged, and now we're seeing kids, as you say, who are type 2 diabetic at a very, very young age. It's not evolutionary appropriate. If we went back in time, 20,000 years, probably even less, well, most definitely less. If we took the average human being and put them into that environment, they would be a laughing stock. That person would be laughed at because they are absolutely counterintuitive to human survival and optimal health. It's not optimal for health and well-being to be clinically obese and slow and lethargic and severely overweight. Yet today, if you venture into your local town, 95+% of the people that you see there are overweight.
Well, you see it as soon as you walk into a hospital. You see Costa, you see, I don't know if Greg's are there, but that sort of food courts in hospitals now. So, and then the food that they feed sick people in hospital is horrendous. I know when my wife gave birth, I think they gave her a piece of toast and marmalade. That was it for the breakfast. She couldn't believe it because, of course, she's from Sweden, and they do look after them a little bit better when they're in childbirth in Sweden. But in England, it was a scrappy piece of toast and a scoop of marmalade. I mean, of course, her mum's Chinese, so she made her eat chicken bone broth with ginger, and for like a week. It's a tradition. You have to have this. It's like 3 or 4 times a day. Chicken, all the gristle, all the collagen, all the bones are in there. And that's just a standard Chinese way that they look after their birthing mothers. If the mother has got gestational diabetes, what chance has the baby got?
Yeah.
So what do we have to do? We have to remove the carbohydrates. So as we said last week, the grain, that includes wheat and bread. And bread spikes blood sugar actually more than sugar.
100%. In fact, I have something I can share my screen with. Maybe we can talk through this. This is part of a presentation that I delivered. Can you see the screen then, Al?
Yeah.
So it's this is a representation of the food pyramid. This is what we're told to consume to be heart healthy, if you like, and it predominates carbohydrate. We're told to keep protein to a minimum, and generally we're told to avoid the natural fats, the saturated fats. Now, the issue with this is that, as we mentioned, all carbs break down into sugar. Now, I've illustrated this with 2 pictures. Obviously, we've got rice and bread and pasta. It's the same as the sugar on the right. They are one and the same. The body treats them the same. Now, the issue is that everything in the supermarket contains high levels of these compounds, as well as the oils that we mentioned last week. There's nothing in this picture is food. There's not one item in this picture that is food. And in fact, I would argue that there are, at the most, 2 aisles in the supermarket which contain food, and that would be the meat and fish aisle and arguably the vegetable aisle. And that's probably a talk for another day. But these are not foods. They're full of toxic chemicals. They've been heavily manipulated by man, designed to fuel your cravings to eat more. And essentially, they cause damage, which leads to the requirement for medication. Before I move on from that, have you got anything you want to chuck into the mix?
I mean, I always say to people at the start, the best way or an easy way to think about it when you start is if it's in a packet, don't eat it. Just go for wholesome meat and, and some veg and some eggs. And, if it's in a packet with a label, let's leave it out for now.
So 100, when I take my little girl shopping, the rule is that she can have whatever she wants as long as it's a single ingredient food.
All right.
So that's the rule. So she can have fruit, she can have vegetables, she can have the meats, king prawns, whatever it is that she wants, within reason. Obviously, we predominate the animal proteins and natural fats, but that's the rule. So single ingredient foods, isn't it?
Yeah.
I do allow other things occasionally, depending on circumstance and what they are, but that's the general rule of thumb.
Yeah, as long as my boy, for example, he's the youngest one, so he doesn't make the wisest choices. He would eat sweets and ice cream all day long, as any child would, because it is cocaine for kids. And as long as he's had his eggs, his protein, sometimes at school he's not liked the sauce. He's very fussy when it comes to sauces on meat. He likes it plain. He don't like ketchup. Wow. Which is a good thing. It's not usual for that. But if he hasn't eaten, then I give him one of your protein drinks as soon as he comes home.
Fantastic.
Make sure he gets his protein in. And of course, because he sees me, that's all I'm eating is fat and protein 99% of the time, and unless, it's strategically used. But and you want them to copy you, don't you? So
100%. And I think we lead by example, but if we take this a step further and understand at a basic level, so this is the cell. Now, under normal circumstances, glucose or sugar needs access to the cell via a transporter called the GLUT4 transporter. And it's insulin that allows access to the cell. So this glucose needs to go through a series of steps. So we consume carbohydrate, breaks it into glucose, the pancreas releases insulin, insulin opens the gate and sends the glucose into the cell in simple terms. Fats, on the other hand, they diffuse into the cell seamlessly. They don't require any transporters or any gate or any special access. In fact, the majority of that cell is made of fat. So it's all of this area around there is fat, and the fat just transfuses or diffuses into the cell seamlessly, which basically means it's there, ready, available for energy, and we don't require this special access via insulin. But the issue is, over time, that insulin is increased to drive this blood glucose down. So this time scale looks at 10 to 15 years. Now, if you were to go to the doctor to see if you are insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic, this bottom line is what they are measuring, which is the blood glucose. Now, when we consume more carbohydrate, the insulin increases and it drives this blood glucose down year after year after year. But this is what we're measuring. But what we're not checking is this insulin level. Insulin behind the scenes is continuing to rise, driving that blood glucose down until it gets to this point where it can no longer increase insulin sufficiently enough to keep the blood glucose down. Now you're diagnosed with pre-diabetes, and this leads on to type 2 diabetes. But it didn't happen there. It happened 10 to 15 years prior. 10 to 15 years prior.
So it could be when you're 20, consuming all this McDonald's or whatever, fast food and carbs. Even if you think you're healthy and you're not eating fast food and you're training, but you're still having the carbs and carbs and carbs, which is what Professor Tim Noakes talks about, didn't he? Because he was carb loading every day, and then massive amounts, because he was a marathon runner. And then, boom, after 50, maybe it took him a bit longer because he was exercising, ultra marathons. That's very, very extreme. But then he found he was type 2 diabetic. And then he apologized for the book that he wrote on carb loading, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, yeah, Professor Noakes.
I know you've been on his show. as well a couple of times. And
Yes,
spoke at that.
I've presented for the Noakes Foundation on a number of occasions, and I'm flying to South Africa to speak at one of his events in October, which is an incredible honor. But yeah, he was a big advocate of carb loading. In fact, he invented carb loading. He is the person. He's the reason why everybody puts carb in before they perform any endurance event or anything to do with athletic sport. And yeah, in 2015, he changed his opinion because he was diagnosed, despite being super active, he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So now he's one of the world's biggest advocates of a ketogenic lifestyle.
Yeah.
So even the people who told us to do this in the first place have changed their way of thinking. And it makes perfect sense. And this is something you and I spoke about last week on the first episode back in the new series. And what this illustrates is a breakfast or a meal which predominates carbohydrates. So it could be cereal, it could be bread, pasta, rice, whatever it is, because they're all the same. This increases insulin from the pancreas. The insulin will increase this enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, which breaks the bonds on the glycerol backbone. So the triglycerides that circulate in the blood. This is what breaks the bonds and allows these to diffuse into the fat cell where they will join back together. So what that means in simple terms is carbohydrates have told your body to store fat. Carbs store fat.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as this. Carbs store fat. Now that we've stored the fat, in order to, we call it burning, but it's oxidizing fat.
Yeah.
But for simplicity purposes and what people understand, that's the terminology that we're going to use. So in order to burn fat or lose that body fat, we need this other enzyme, hormone-sensitive lipase. Hormone-sensitive lipase will perform this in reverse by breaking these bonds on the glycerol backbone to allow the fatty acids to diffuse into the bloodstream. But guess what inhibits this fat loss?
Insulin.
Insulin, 100%. Insulin blocks hormone-sensitive lipase. It blocks your body's ability to burn this body fat.
So that means if somebody, even if they're not eating carbs, but they've got high insulin all the time, hyperinsulinemia, they can't access their fat cells.
100%. And the issue is that we're told to eat little and often, so we're constantly eliciting this insulin response. The more that you do that, the more resistant that you become, and therefore the higher levels for a prolonged period of time your insulin lasts. So basically, we could eat, in a state of insulin resistance, we could eat some sugar in the morning, some muesli, and our insulin could be elevated for a very, very long time, which basically means that we're in fat storage mode for hours and hours and hours. Just as it starts to come back down, what do? We eat again.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely counterintuitive to eat these compounds if you want to lose unhealthy body fat.
So, of course, when they first treat pre-diabetes or diabetes, they give you metformin, which lowers blood sugar. Doesn't lower the insulin, though, because they keep telling them to eat the carbohydrates. Then eventually the metformin is not strong enough. So then they give you insulin to inject. So then technically you must be type 1 diabetic, I guess, because is that correct that you're injecting your insulin then because you're not producing enough? It's just not working. So it's progressive and getting worse. And then, of course, people are getting bigger and bigger and getting in more trouble with their kidneys, with their eyes, with their limbs, their circulation. And that's when they start losing limbs. Now, what causes high blood pressure? Because that is really common in guys, even as young as 25, I've seen it.
Yeah, 100%. High blood pressure or essential hypertension is caused by elevated insulin. It's an insulin-dependent state. So we look at it as being an issue with sodium or salt, but it's not. So what happens is when we're in this insulin-resistant state, and you mentioned there type 2 diabetes, high blood glucose is type 2 diabetes. That's what we know it as. Sugar in the brain is known as Alzheimer's. Sugar in the eye is known as glaucoma. So all of these things are connected to this one thing. We see them as being separate things, but they're all connected. Now, the other contributing factor in this state of insulin resistance is high blood pressure, because insulin will pull sodium from 4 points in the nephrons in the kidneys into the blood. Wherever sodium goes, water follows. So what we find on a ketogenic lifestyle, when people gravitate into lowering carbohydrate and reducing the seed oils, is insulin begins to correct itself almost overnight. I've worked with clients who have reversed their diabetes in as little as 2 weeks. 2 weeks. You know,
well, I had high blood pressure. I was prescribed beta blockers when I was about 35, 34, and I never took them. And I started going low carb, and I reversed the high blood pressure straight away. Literally within a week, it had gone. And now it's been perfect ever since. And I've never took a medication for that.
Yeah, 100%. You know, we see this. Look, we're in this society where we're told, look, you've got an insulin problem. Your body doesn't make enough insulin, and that isn't true. It's not correct. It's the fact that we have too high a level of blood glucose. It's not an insulin problem, it's a glucose problem. So instead of lowering the glucose and therefore our requirement for insulin, we come about it from the wrong perspective. We're told to increase the insulin, which leads to this weight gain, this fat storage, and further resistance and high blood pressure and all these sorts of things. And as you say, it leads to a whole host of other problems. The key to this is removing the glucose or the carbohydrate, because again, all carbohydrate is sugar. When we reduce this, insulin begins to correct itself. And we can see this overnight. If you were to measure serum insulin levels today, restrict carbohydrates, by tomorrow, you would see a reduction in blood insulin. And this begins to come down, and this is how we correct the type 2 diabetes. But we're told it's an insulin problem. We're given medication like metformin. Now, metformin will lower blood glucose levels, which seems to be on the base of it what we're trying to do. But this is done through the wrong mechanism. So essentially what happens with metformin is that it tells the cell to force glucose into the cell. So if we imagine a cell, on the surface of the cell, you have the GLUT4 transporter, and this is how glucose enters the cell and stores. When the cell becomes too full, there's a protective mechanism in which the cell pulls this transporter back beneath the surface to prevent any more glucose from coming in, because it's trying to protect the cell. What things like metformin do is metformin signals a pathway called AMPK. It forces the translocation of the GLUT4 transporter back to the surface, allowing more storage and access of this glucose, which sounds good. So we see the blood glucose levels coming down and we think it's good, but behind the scenes, this fat cell is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually it becomes too big and it starts to leak. Now this becomes toxic. Now this is incredibly detrimental. What we're doing when we take these drugs is we're forcing our body to perform something that it's told you that it doesn't want to do for a safety mechanism. It's doing this to save your life. It's preventing the glucose from entering the cell because the cell is going to become damaged. When you take this medication, it's forcing this glucose in, which is not what we want to do. The answer to this, reduce the carbohydrate. It's super simple. Reduce the carbohydrate.
So some people might say, and they've read about a simple carbohydrate or a complex carbohydrate, like their healthy brown bread, for example, as they call it. What's the difference?
Well, look, ultimately nothing. I mean, we look at them as being slow active and fast active. And yes, it can have a lower impact on your blood sugar spike, but the load is sometimes even more. So the glycemic load can sometimes be more, but it's still, again, what I would prefer to see, my personal opinion, I would rather see a spike and a recovery rather than this mountain effect. Because what we don't want, again, is this prolonged effect of insulin being, elevated for a long period of time. Well,
I used to eat simple carbohydrates and mostly complex carbohydrates in potatoes and bread or brown bread. And I was always tired, always. And literally afternoon, you're nodding off. And now I struggle to sleep more because I've got too much energy. And that's the other end of the spectrum, which shouldn't happen as you get older, should it? But now I have. So it definitely, now when I do a carb refeed, as you know, I use it as a tool for my training. But I'm insulin sensitive now, so it does its job. It does like what it did when I was 18. So the carb refills me and then it's gone, or I use it for that workout or that explosiveness. But if the dose is in, the poison's in the dose. Sometimes I may have only one rice cake. That's it for the whole workout. We had a question actually. Someone said, I thought you need carbs to lift weights. Well, I did that 4 days high intensity training with Dorian, and it was about 50 degrees in that gym that summer with no aircon. It was like a heat wave in Spain. And I think the most I had, which was on leg day, was, you know, one of them sachets of honey that you get in the hotel. I'd have one of them. That was it for that sort of intensity on that workout. And I was fine. But I was drinking electrolytes and salt. I was taking it, every mouthful I was putting in your electrolytes in the water. And I got through that workout, and I'm still here to live to tell the tale. So
yeah, and Al, you know, it's you don't appear to be skinny or short of any muscle or strength, and you are very, very low carb. You know, the fact is you don't need carb to build muscle. In fact, what do you need carb for? What is carb required for from an exogenous source? I mean, we have essential fatty acids, essential amino acids. What do we need carb for?
yeah, exactly. It's not essential at all. But what I found on my hormone panel and studying with guys, I think it's been proved that SHBG can raise if insulin is low all the time. And so no, Bart K talks about having boluses of protein to spike insulin. Of course, nothing spikes insulin as much as a simple carbohydrate like white rice, and then that lowers the SHBG. And on my blood work and clients' blood works, all their SHBG has been on the low to moderate range, which has made their free testosterone almost double from what it was before on their standard diet. So that's one of the reasons I do the carb. But I don't even look forward to the carb day because I've been doing this so long. To me, I look forward to the butter day, the steak and fat day, the carb. It's not even a day anymore. It's got less and less. It's now a period of a few hours, almost 2 meals, and then that's it. I've done it for 2 days straight. If you're doing a show, you've done it for a show. You fill your whole body up with the glycogen even more, with the water, with the triglycerides as well. And, you know, you put on about, how much do you put on in that load? About 14 pounds or something.
So over the course of 4 to 5 days with fat feeding and glyco is 17 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. And you wouldn't get that without that carb.
100%. But purely for aesthetic purposes, I mean, it's I'm pretty low carb, generally zero. The SHBG mine is always low anyway. My test is always the thing with the ranges also, I think, is that it's the body works very differently, isn't it? But it's certainly a tool. Carbohydrate is a tool in athletic performance.
That's how I look at it. If you're fixing your car, you don't use every single tool every time. You pick up what you need. And it depends. People say, should you do cyclical keto, targeted keto, or strict? It depends. And if you're most likely metabolically damaged, you should be strict for a period, whether that's 2 weeks, whether that's a month. I was close to 2 years before I went to cyclical keto. So I'd obviously healed any cravings. I'd healed the gut. I'd healed my insulin sensitivity. And I've been doing the cyclical ever since, and no detriment on blood work or feeling. And if I didn't feel right, I wouldn't do it. I don't miss them. I don't crave it. I do it for this tour. And for somebody else, when they start in, especially people that train as a client, it can be a bit scary for them and think, I'm not quitting all the carbs, because they're so brainwashed that they need carbs for muscle. They need it for recovery. If you simply told them, no, we're not having any, they wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a series of incremental changes as well, isn't it? I mean, and for a number of, one from a mental aspect, as you say, but also from a gut microbiome perspective in regards to the die-off and the adaptation process with the changes of the phylum to that which thrives on proteins and fats. It does take time. And that's why, I recommend clients gravitate towards keto first, before potentially, if they want to gravitate deeper down that journey and venture towards carnivore, I usually advise that they begin their journey as keto for those
carnivore
reasons.
wasn't around when we started. I mean, there was probably people doing it, of course, because you see there's that lady that's 82 and she looks about 45 with biceps. And of course, she's done it forever. But it wasn't a big thing till Sean Baker. I remember when he started. And of course, everybody was like, what the hell? This big dude on the rowing machine going crazy with his big knife eating a steak. So again, he certainly made waves. But he's never faltered. That's what he does.
Yeah.
Do you know the steak and butter gal?
Yes.
Do you know her personally?
No, I do not personally.
Because I see one of the other keto ladies who's done it longer than anybody was talking about her, how she don't believe what she's eating because the amount of food she professes to consume is even too much for me. The plate that she has, I think, wow, does she really eat that much food? Because I would be surprised. I eat close to 4,000 calories, 3.5 to 4,000 daily, but that looks like over 4,000 on a plate. Whether it's just for clicks, I don't know. I don't know the girl, but there is, when people say, do you count calories? Do you have to? But when you've gone down to 5% body fat, every calorie counts. Then you do have to be aware of what you're consuming. But as a normal person, if your hormones are working correctly and your hunger signals are there, you don't need to count. You just eat sensibly. You just, if you go to a buffet and sit there for 5 hours eating, common sense tells you that can't be that healthy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's difficult to say because people are so on the keto, so calories are not, it's frigging heat or whatever. But people understand the word calorie. It's just a measurement. I think it's too nitpicky to say that they don't exist. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, it's for the sake of general understanding, we use them, but they do work very differently. I mean, it's a calorie doesn't really exist in the context as we understand, but it's what people understand. But they do work very differently, don't they? I mean, when I was consuming 2,500 calorie equivalent from a high carb diet, I was 17.5 stone and clinically obese.
Yeah.
Now I consume 4,000 to 6,000 some days, and I'm single figure body fat.
Yeah.
Because
you get a bit more leeway for sure.
Oh, 100%. Because it's ultimately insulin that's driving that fat storage, and protein supplies a very, very low insulin response. In fact, it's impossible, or near enough impossible, to store fat unless we elicit insulin. And we can see this if we consume nothing but fat in our diet without that insulin response. It's very difficult to store that fat.
Yeah, but of course you need protein to live. Protein is not just for muscle. Protein is for your bones, your heart, your brain, your skin. We are made of protein. So we cannot live on just fat. We know
100%.
That. And if, like Bart says, you're eating a big bolus of protein, you are eliciting an insulin response. So if you consume 10,000 calories every single day on strict carnivore, you will gain weight. You see it all the time with Keto Savage, Robert. He's zero carb, but he don't maintain his 5% body fat, or 3% he went down to. He doesn't maintain that. He gets fluffy. He goes to 15% because he's trying to add as much muscle as he can. And it's not optimal to add muscle when you are 3%. It's probably more optimal to get injured in the gym. So, of course, you are eliciting a response, so you store some fat.
Yeah. Which is a natural process, by the way. You know, that is a natural process.
Yeah. Winter comes, you get fat for winter, and that protects you when you've got no food. Of course, if they can't go out hunting in the winter because the animals are also hibernating, it's like the big bear, isn't it? They get fat for winter, and then it lasts them throughout the summer.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of the things you mentioned there, Al, which I wanted to circle back to, was one of the main reasons that people will fall off the wagon when they gravitate into this way of living. And you mentioned electrolytes, and for full disclosure for everyone who's listening, I do make electrolytes, but I make them because I believe
I've got them here. I don't know if I'm on screen now, but
yeah, me too. So that's what I drink. But it's a very important. So coming back to this essential hypertension, essentially when we lower insulin, then this signals the kidneys, at least in the short term, to release the sodium from the body. And this can lead to something called keto flu. Keto flu is the reason that most people throw the towel in, because it leads to feeling tired, fatigued, nauseous, and so on. And we're told then that, to listen to our bodies, and this is probably the one time not to listen to the body. But the fact is, the sodium is essential. It's essential for life. So at least in the very short term, we need to replace it. And we can do it from natural sources like pink Himalayan or Celtic sea salt. Celtic would be my preference over pink Himalayan. And obviously there's a range of electrolytes that I produce in order to do this, specifically for this. I consume them on a daily basis because I find that I thrive even better on them. But we're told to avoid sodium. We're told to consume less than 1.5 grams a day, or 1,500 milligrams. But what the research actually shows is an inverse association. Basically, the less sodium we consume, the higher all-cause mortality, with the sweet spot being, according to this, between 4,000 to 6,000. But this study is based on excretion. So they measured what is excreted from the body, not what was consumed. I probably consume closer to 10,000 milligrams of sodium each day.
Me too. Yeah.
And this is the key, isn't it? This is the key to offsetting this sudden drop. We drop insulin, the body releases the sodium, we feel pretty shitty. Replacing the salts, at least in the short term, can negate that. And that's where you need to move on to the next point in your journey, isn't it? So, I mean, week one,
you're going to need more. You're going to need more. So on your big scoop, because I know you've got some little scoops now, haven't you, in the new one, how many scoops a day, or how much sodium is in this large scoop here?
So it depends on your requirements. So on the tub, we have to put on, by law, use 1 to 2 scoops a day. I use anywhere between 5 to 10 scoops.
But how much is one scoop given me on here?
So
I
one
probably
scoop...
couldn't read that. It's too small. Too old.
One scoop is now 5 grams. It used to be 10, but we've reduced it down to 5, because if you want 10 grams, you can add 2 scoops.
Yeah.
The reason I did this is because people would just add in a full scoop all the time, when maybe they don't require a full scoop, because they are very strong. They're probably one of the strongest.
You say 5 grams or 10 grams. This one is, and what's in that 10 grams? How much sodium?
So there's around 1,000 milligrams of sodium, also around 1,000 milligrams of potassium, and the ratios are critically important. Around 100 milligrams, I think it's 96 milligrams of highly bioavailable magnesium. No calcium, because calcium in excess, in my opinion, is damaging to the body. Yes, we need it. It's essential for life. It's one of 6 compounds which is essential, but we obtain plenty of this from the animal proteins that we consume. Also contains molybdenum, selenium, astaxanthin, and 66 other trace minerals like iodine and boron, for example, just to name a few. But this is critically important to negating the keto flu in the early stages. But how much to consume? adjust the taste, listen to your body.
I eat salt as well, though. I have about half a teaspoon of salt before the workout. I just eat the salt and drink some water. And I find the energy increases massively, and the pumps in the gym, because your blood volume increases. And then when you're leg pressing or squatting, your blood volume drops quite quickly. So if mine's increased, it drops to normal, so you can keep going through the workout. So that's all I had with Dorian's workouts was salt, mostly. Now, I've got clients in Utah. They have that Redmond real salt in America. I think that's one of the best in America, I believe. And now they've brought in electrolytes, because some of them was having the LMNT. But I think that the Utah Redmond salt is one of the best in the world as salt. Is that correct?
Yeah, from a salt perspective. There are many brands out there who can, add in lots of nasties. Don't understand the reabsorption of the sodium potassium, so the ratios are all wrong. Unfortunately, most of the brands on the market now have followed what Element were doing, which in my opinion is the wrong ratio. And they've all sort of copied this because they were,
because they was getting big. Yeah.
But
I know when I first started keto and I didn't know what I was doing and I was learning, there was none of these podcasts. I remember getting heart palpitations, and it's quite panicky. What causes that then? Is that the potassium shortage?
Yeah, I think so. Look, potassium is calming to the heart. It can also be calcium. So calcium can be excitatory. Calcium and magnesium work against each other, if you like. Calcium excites and magnesium relaxes. So if the calcium is too high, then that can cause problems.
Yeah, I didn't have any calcium back then because I was super, super strict, but I probably wasn't. You never had electrolyte. I didn't know you then, so I was just eating salt. Of course, you quit your bananas. I was never a huge fan of avocado. I've forced myself to like it over the years, but I was brought up in the 70s where my mum would never, ever buy avocado because she thought they were fattening.
Yeah.
So we never had them in our house. And I didn't really know what it was. So, of course, potassium in an avocado is double that of a banana.
It is, yeah.
That's the best fruit to eat on a ketogenic diet, would you say?
Yeah, and it's a staple. It is a staple during the transition on a ketogenic lifestyle. There are lots of things that you can consume from the plant kingdom, which we can get into on the next call. But I think what are the takeaways so far, Al? I mean, we've basically discussed in week 1 removing the grains and seed oils. Week 2, we've discussed reducing the carbohydrates. So week 2 has basically brought us to the third step, if you like, and that's reducing carb. Yet we look at it as being the first, but for us, it's the third most important step. And I think, we've highlighted the importance of a correct electrolyte balance, and essentially that all carbohydrates are sugar. And that's an important point to make.
And we must point out that somebody, if they're starting this on their own and they're on blood pressure medication, they need to track their blood pressure every day, because it will drop very quickly and they may not need that blood pressure medication. Yes. So they need to speak to their doctor to wean themselves off that, because if they're not eating the carbs, the blood pressure is going to come down.
100%. And it is as simple as this, isn't it? We see it with clients all the time. Al, I think we've nailed this for episode 2. I think next week, I think we should discuss the next process in the low-carb ketogenic journey. For me, that's understanding protein.
I was just going to say protein. That's my favorite macro, my favorite
It's topic. The most important.
Yeah, exactly. And which protein should you have? Should you have animal? Should you have soy? Should you blah, blah, blah? What is collagen, for example? What is whey? So we can go through the proteins next week. Perfect.
Fantastic. I look forward to that. So, Al, been a pleasure as always.
Thanks,
fantastic
mate.
Information as always. Take care, and we will catch you back next week to discuss protein in detail.
Bye.